As anarchists, we're constantly saying that we don't need regulation, that property rights and legal liability are enough to resolve conflicts, that instead of politicians micromanaging society, people can peacefully resolve disputes through a legal system rooted in natural rights. But if we're going to claim that private property is the solution, then we need to be able to answer the hard questions. And data centers provide some of those hard questions. People are expressing concerns about noise, water use, energy use, and surveillance, and they are worried about giant corporations reshaping communities. This gives us an opportunity to compare how anarchy would handle those concerns as opposed to our current statist legal system. Because what we have today is not a market peacefully resolving conflict, it's companies optimizing for regulatory approval. Right now, if a company wants to build a massive project, the strategy is political. Get approval, get permits, get subsidies, get zoning changes. And once the government signs off, everyone acts like the moral question has already been settled. But anarchists reject the premise that government permission is the same thing as rightful permission. So what would happen in a free legal system? Under proper law, the real question is, what are the actual property rights here? Because a Rothbardian legal system cuts both ways. It doesn't mean corporations can do whatever they want, but it also doesn't mean neighbors get veto power over someone else's property just because they dislike a project. There's a difference between I don't like this and my rights were violated. If a project creates measurable harms that physically cross into your property, like excessive noise, contamination, vibrations, or pollution, then yes, you may have a claim. And under a free legal system, companies would actually have to internalize those costs by redesigning or negotiating or compensating in the form of buying easements and paying for consent, or locating somewhere else. They wouldn't be able to externalize those costs politically. That's the market discovering the true cost of doing something. And at the same time, rights work both ways. You don't get to dictate what peaceful things somebody else does on land they own simply because you preferred the old view, or because you dislike how a building looks, or because you wanted untouched land that you don't own. Much like when we talk about agriculture, there is no such thing as the right to biodiversity on land you don't own. Or if you move into an area where there's already an airport, you don't have the right to absolute silence. The noise was already there. Rights are boundaries, not preferences. This is exactly why a Rothbardian legal ethic is not just more principled, but actually more practical. Because instead of locking people into a system where corporations optimize for political permissions, private actors would actually have to deal with the people whose property rights might be affected. If you're entering a community, you should be subject to the rights of the people already there. That's a solution that avoids having to trust the state, which has clearly failed to protect people, in spite of the fact that public protection is how the state justifies its own existence. It's also worth noting that if water sources weren't politically controlled, owners would have to consider what happens to their standing in their own communities by taking on clients that their existing user base doesn't want to associate with. And finally, I think people need to be careful about drifting into neo-Luddism. Because yes, technology creates new problems, but new technology is also usually what makes ordinary people richer. Higher productivity means lower costs and better quality of life by offering more choices and new opportunities. And historically, the biggest gains often go to people with the least. The wealthy get new conveniences, poor people get access to things that fundamentally improve life. Right now, AI is being talked about like it's bound to be a tool for the powerful alone. But what about how ordinary people will come to use it? Human history has always been like this. The spear gets invented, then the shield. The firearm is invented, but then bulletproof materials emerge. Surveillance technology advances, but then encryption advances. Power centralizes, then decentralized solutions emerge. The gun may have been used to oppress and conquer, but it also fundamentally changed how ordinary people protect themselves from tyranny. New technological dangers emerge, and new protections emerge with them. The problem isn't technology. The problem is people who fear technology and are using that fear to justify freezing progress while ignoring the distorted legal system that already fails to protect people. The answer is better property rights and more freedom, not less.